There are moments in life when the noise inside your mind becomes louder than the world around you. When you wake up already tired, not because your body is weak, but because your thoughts have been running all night, replaying conversations, imagining problems, creating storms that never existed. You sit quietly, but your mind is not quiet. You smile around others, but inside something feels heavy. You try to focus, but every thought pulls you somewhere else. And there comes a moment, maybe you felt it recently, when you look at yourself and wonder why your mind feels like it's working against you. You don't tell anyone, you don't complain, you don't show it, but inside it feels like a silent war, and you're losing ground inch by inch. Most people think struggle looks loud, shouting, crying, breaking down. But the real struggle, the one that wears you down, happens quietly. In the space between your thoughts, in the way you analyze every word you spoke, in the way you replay mistakes no one else remembers, in the way you try to control everything, but end up controlling nothing. You search for clarity, but your mind gives you confusion. You look for peace, but your thoughts pull you back into the storm. You try to focus, but every distraction feels stronger than your will. You start doubting yourself, you start questioning your direction, and worst of all, you start believing the lies your mind whispers when you're tired. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm falling behind. Why can't I stay focused like everyone else? But what you don't realize is that almost every strong person, every disciplined mind, every calm soul you admire, once stood exactly where you stand now. Marcus Aurelius did. Seneca did. Epictetus did. They all fought this same silent battle. The world you face today is louder and faster, but the struggle inside the mind has always been the same. Here's the truth no one told you. Your mind is not the enemy. Your thoughts are not trying to destroy you. They are simply loud because you've never learned how to silence them. And this is where everything begins. Not with strength, not with perfection, not with clarity, but with awareness, because awareness is the first step toward control. You cannot silence a mind you do not understand. You cannot master thoughts you do not see clearly. You cannot focus when you haven't confronted what pulls you away. So ask yourself honestly, when was the last time your mind actually felt quiet? Not empty, not numb, just calm. You probably can't remember. Most people can't. Because somewhere along the way, responsibilities, expectations, failures, regrets, comparisons, noise, screens, your mind became a battlefield instead of a compass. You became reactive instead of reflective, distracted instead of disciplined, pulled by emotion instead of guided by reason. And slowly, without noticing, your thoughts began to own you. You feel it in the morning when you wake up tired. You feel it during the day when you can't concentrate. You feel it at night when you replay every small mistake. But the truth is simple. Your thoughts are not facts. Your mind is not fixed. Your chaos is not permanent. You are not broken. You are simply untrained. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion. It's about controlling it. It's not about pretending the noise isn't there. It's about quieting it. It's not about escaping the mind. It's about mastering it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind is like a fire. When it burns cleanly, it gives light. When it burns uncontrollably, it becomes smoke. Right now, your mind might feel full of smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to see through. Thoughts swirling, emotions rising, clarity disappearing. But fires can be cleaned, minds can be sharpened, noise can be silenced. This journey you're about to take is not about escaping your thoughts. It's about reclaiming them, understanding why they turn toxic, seeing how modern life hijacks your focus, learning the ancient truths the Stoics discovered, and finally applying the practical steps to sharpen your mind again. Before anything can change, one truth must be accepted. You suffer more from the noise inside your mind than from the world outside it. And the moment you realize this, something shifts. A small space opens, a small silence appears, a small breath returns. And in that silence, clarity begins to whisper gently, quietly, as if it has been waiting for you all along. This is where your transformation begins, with honesty, with awareness, with the courage to finally face the one thing you've been avoiding, your own mind. And once you face it, you can finally learn to silence it. You've lived long enough to know that the world outside doesn't hurt you as much as the world inside. The real prison has never been your circumstances, your environment, or the people around you. The real prison is the endless conversation happening in your own head, the one that never stops, the one that twists every small thing into something heavier, the one that keeps you trapped even when everything around you is calm. You begin to see this clearly when you notice how differently people experience the same moment. Two people face the same challenge, one collapses, the other grows. Two people hear the same criticism, one breaks, the other becomes sharper. Two people walk through the same storm, one feels lost, the other feels tested. Why? Because their outer world is identical, but their inner world completely different. This is where most people misunderstand life. They think they suffer because of events. They think they stress because of situations. They think their pain comes from what they see, when in reality it comes from how they interpret what they see. Your mind is a storyteller, and sometimes it tells the wrong story. It exaggerates danger. It imagines rejection. It creates problems that don't exist. It takes a single moment and stretches it into a lifelong fear. And slowly, without realizing, you become a prisoner of your own interpretations. You start avoiding things not because they are harmful, but because your mind convinced you they might be. You hold back not because the world is against you, but because your thoughts have rehearsed every possible failure. You hesitate not because you lack ability, but because your mind is busy predicting disaster. This is the inner prison the Stoics warned us about. A prison made of fear, assumptions, emotions, and imagined outcomes. The walls are invisible, but the weight is real. Marcus Aurelius saw it in himself when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." He wasn't preaching. He was admitting that the real battle was always internal. The modern world only intensified this battle. Every notification pulls your attention. Every comparison steals your peace. Every distraction scatters your mind a little more. Every judgment from others becomes a replayed thought in your inner echo chamber. You live in an age of constant noise, and your mind, designed for stillness, is drowning in it. But the dangerous part isn't the noise itself. It's how quickly you get used to it, how naturally chaos becomes your normal state, how silently your mind forgets what clarity feels like. You begin scrolling to escape your thoughts, but the scrolling only feeds them. You stay busy to avoid your problems, but the busyness only multiplies them. You chase one goal after another, hoping something will silence the noise, but every achievement feels temporary, like a brief pause before the mind starts again. And you start wondering, why can't I control my focus? Why does my mind resist peace? Why do toxic thoughts come so easily? Why does silence feel uncomfortable? because the inner prison becomes comfortable, familiar, predictable. You don't even notice the chains anymore. Overthinking becomes routine, worry becomes habit, chaos becomes identity, and a restless mind becomes who you think you are. But that's the illusion. You were not born with this noise. You learned it, you absorbed it, you repeated it long enough for it to feel permanent. The Stoics understood something powerful. The mind becomes what it repeatedly thinks. If you think fear, you become fear. If you think anger, you become anger. If you think doubt, you become doubt. If you think peace, you become peace. The inner prison is built by repetition, not reality, and once you see that clearly, something shifts. You realize your thoughts are not chains, they are habits. You realize your fears are not truths, they are stories. You realize your doubts are not facts, they are echoes. You begin to recognize the difference between what your mind tells you and what is actually true. You start noticing the space between stimulus and response, the space the Stoics lived in. That is the beginning of freedom. Not breaking out of the prison, but seeing that the door was never locked. You don't escape the mind by force, you escape it by understanding. And understanding begins with this profound realization. The battle was never between you and the world. It was always between you and the noise inside you. Once you see this, the prison starts to crack. The noise begins to slow. The thoughts lose some of their power, the fog starts to thin, and for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel something you almost forgot existed, a small, quiet, steady clarity. It doesn't shout, it doesn't push, it just whispers one thing: there is another way to live. Clarity begins in moments you don't expect, not in loud victories, but in quiet realizations. You start sensing the difference between the mind that reacts and the mind that understands. And this is where ancient Stoic wisdom enters your life, not as a philosophy to study, but as a mirror reflecting what you've always known but never said out loud. You begin to notice how Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to the world, not to inspire others, but to confront the parts of his mind that tried to control him. Every line in his meditations is a reminder that even an emperor struggled with the same thoughts you do: fear, doubt, distraction, frustration, and the constant pull of emotions trying to dictate his actions. Suddenly, the gap between you and ancient wisdom disappears. The human mind has not changed. The world around you has become louder, faster, more overwhelming, but the inner battles are the same battles fought thousands of years ago. Overthinking, worry, emotional storms, moments of weakness, the weight of expectations, the pressure to be everything for everyone. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. You read that, and you feel it. You feel how many problems you've lived through that never actually happened. You feel how many fears were just shadows. You feel how many sleepless nights were spent wrestling with thoughts that dissolved by morning. This is the ancient truth: your mind is powerful, but not always accurate. It creates illusions with the same conviction as it creates wisdom. It gives strength and steals it. It builds clarity and destroys it. And most people live their entire lives without learning to separate the mind that helps them from the mind that harms them. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were aware. They watched their thoughts like a quiet observer, not a victim. They understood that thoughts are like visitors, some helpful, some destructive, none permanent. You begin to see it too. You realize your thoughts are not commands. They are not obligations. They are not predictions of fate. They are simply mental events passing through the space of your awareness. This realization changes your relationship with yourself. You no longer panic when a negative thought appears. You no longer spiral when your mind becomes loud. You begin to observe instead of absorb. The thought says, you can't. You answer with silence. The thought says, what if it goes wrong? You breathe. The thought says, you're not enough. You watch it come and watch it go. This is the ancient practice, the art of stepping back from your own mind, the art of seeing without reacting, the art of recognizing that the content of your thoughts is not the content of your life. As you do this, something unexpected happens. The mind begins to calm, not because life becomes easier, but because your awareness becomes sharper. The fog begins to thin. You start noticing things you missed before, the rhythm of your breathing, the quiet spaces between thoughts, the way silence feels when you stop resisting it. You start seeing how often you've mistaken emotion for truth, how often you've accepted fear as fact, how often you've let your mind tell you who you are, instead of deciding that for yourself. And slowly, the wisdom of the Stoics stops sounding ancient. It begins to sound familiar. It begins to sound like the voice inside you that you've ignored for too long. Epictetus said, you become what you give your attention to. You reflect on this and it hits deeper than before. Because now you can see the truth of it in your own life. The way your attention shaped your fears, your habits, your identity, your peace. Your mind is not your enemy. It is simply untrained, unobserved, unguided, and the more you see this, the clearer it becomes. The mind is a tool, and tools can be sharpened. What you are truly seeking is not a life without thoughts, but a life where your thoughts do not control you. Not a life without challenges, but a life where challenges do not shake your inner stability. Not a life without struggle, but a life where struggle becomes training. This is the ancient truth, the truth you were never taught, but always needed. Peace is not the absence of noise. Peace is learning to remain unmoved within it, and now, for the first time, you feel yourself moving toward that peace, not by force, but by awareness, not by escaping your mind, but by understanding it. This is the beginning of transformation, the beginning of seeing yourself clearly, the beginning of the life you were meant to live, not trapped in your thoughts, but free within them. A strange calm settled over him that evening. For the first time, he noticed how loud the world actually was, and how quiet his own mind had become. It wasn't perfect, of course. Toxic thoughts still tried to break in, knocking on the doors of his attention like uninvited guests. But now he didn't open the door. He simply observed their knocking, then let the sound fade on its own. This is what nobody tells you. The mind does not become clear by force. It becomes clear the moment you stop feeding what clouds it. He realized he had been pouring energy into every negative thought, every insult, every fear, every memory that hurt, and in doing so he made them stronger. But when he paused, when he breathed, when he allowed the thoughts to pass without wrestling them, something miraculous happened. They dissolved, not in a dramatic way, not like a fire being extinguished, but like fog thinning as the sun rises. Slowly, naturally, on its own, he remembered a quote from Marcus Aurelius that he had read years ago but never understood until now. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And suddenly he understood why his days had felt so heavy. He had been painting his life with the darkest colors his mind offered him. But now he was choosing differently. As he walked home, he felt lighter, as if his mind had finally taken a deep breath after years of suffocation. The world around him hadn't changed, the noise was still there, the problems were still waiting for him, the challenges still unavoidable. But inside him, space had opened, a quiet center, a calm witness, and with that calm came something he had been missing for years: focus. Focus not forced by pressure or fear, but born from clarity, born from the simple recognition that the mind becomes sharp when it stops carrying what does not belong to it. He realized that most people lose their focus not because they are weak, but because they are full of thoughts that drain them, full of stories that hurt them, full of fears they keep replaying, but emptiness, the right kind of emptiness that is power. And so as he reached his door, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would no longer feed thoughts that poisoned him. He would no longer argue with storms that were never his to control. He would no longer carry weights that belonged to yesterday. He would clear his mind not once, but every day as consistently as he breathed, because clarity is not an event, it is a discipline. And that night, for the first time in years, he slept with a clean mind and woke with a focused soul. The next morning felt different the moment he opened his eyes. There was no rush, no panic, no swarm of thoughts waiting to grab him by the throat. Instead, there was space, as if his mind had been washed clean overnight. But clarity, he realized, is fragile. It must be protected, guarded, treated like a flame that can be extinguished by the slightest wind. So he sat at the edge of his bed, breathing slowly, letting the day come to him instead of chasing it. He could feel the old patterns trying to wake up, the urge to check his phone, the instinct to replay yesterday's mistakes, the reflex to worry about things that hadn't even happened yet. But he did not give in. He stayed still, letting those impulses pass like shadows crossing a wall, and for the first time in his life he felt in control. Not of the world, not of people, not of circumstances, but of himself, and that was enough. Later, as he walked outside, he noticed how differently everything looked when the mind wasn't fogged. The street wasn't just noise, it was movement, life, rhythm. Conversations around him weren't distractions, they were background music. Even people who once frustrated him seemed less threatening now, as if their words had lost the power to enter the quiet space he had built within himself. He wondered how much of his suffering had come from the world, and how much had come from the way he interpreted it. The answer became painfully clear. Most of it was his own doing, not intentionally but unconsciously. He had been the one opening the door to every toxic thought. He had been the one giving power to what drained him. He had been the one fighting invisible battles in his head while life moved on without him. But now things were different. He walked with a kind of stillness that others could sense but not explain. He listened more, spoke less. He reacted slowly, intentionally, and whenever a toxic thought tried to sneak in, he simply acknowledged it, then let it pass like watching a leaf drift down a river, never needing to pick it up. This was the power Stoicism had given him, the ability to remain calm in a world that thrives on chaos, the ability to choose his thoughts instead of being chosen by them, the ability to protect his focus like a treasure that determines the quality of his entire life. And he realized something profound. A clear mind is not empty. A clear mind is free, free to think, free to act, free to grow, free to become who he was always meant to be. As the day went on, he felt himself stepping into a version of himself he had been searching for, calmer, stronger, sharper. And he knew it wasn't a one-time victory. This was a practice, a discipline, a way of living. But for the first time, he believed he could live it. He began to understand that clarity is not something you wait for. It is something you create, something you build through small, deliberate choices that seem insignificant in the moment, but shape the entire direction of your life. So he created a quiet ritual to anchor himself each morning. No phone, no noise, no rush, just breathe, body awareness. He would sit with his hands relaxed, eyes half open, observing whatever rose within his mind. Sometimes a worry would appear, sometimes a memory, sometimes nothing, but he didn't push anything away, and he didn't cling to anything either. He allowed thoughts to move like weather passing through, never permanent. This was the first practice. The second came during the day. Whenever someone spoke to him, he trained himself to listen fully instead of preparing a reply. He realized how much energy he used to spend worrying about what others thought, or how he looked, or whether he sounded smart enough. But now he let the moment be what it was. He didn't need to impress anyone. He didn't need to defend himself. When you are aligned with your truth, the world loses its power to shake you. The third practice was restraint. Not the kind that feels forced, but the kind that feels like strength held quietly. He stopped saying everything he felt. He stopped reacting to every emotion. He stopped feeding the thoughts that once dragged him into darkness. A Stoic knows that silence is not weakness, silence is mastery, and he began to notice an extraordinary change. Instead of being consumed by his thoughts, he had begun to guide them. Instead of pouring energy into what didn't matter, he reserved his strength for what did. Instead of drowning in possibilities, he moved with intention. He understood now why Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If he wanted a calm life, he needed calm thoughts. If he wanted a focused mind, he needed disciplined attention. If he wanted inner peace, he needed inner order. So he became a guardian of his mind. Whenever he felt negativity rising, anger, fear, overthinking, he paused. He breathed. He observed the feeling without letting it rule him. This pause became his shield, a single moment of awareness that saved him from hours of unnecessary chaos. The world around him didn't become quieter, his mind did, and the clarity he found was not loud, dramatic, or sudden. It was subtle, steady, like a river carving its way through rock. Over time, he stopped seeking approval. He stopped chasing validation. He stopped needing the world to be perfect before he could feel stable inside. The change was not in the world, it was in him. And as this new way of living took root, he realized something even deeper. Controlling the mind is not about suppressing thoughts, but about choosing which ones to give life to. Most thoughts are nothing but visitors. You don't have to let every visitor stay. He finally understood the Stoic path, not as theory, but as experience. Clarity, restraint, presence, acceptance, small choices, repeated daily, shaping a stronger, calmer version of himself. And for the first time he felt prepared, not just to survive the world, but to lead himself through it with a quiet strength no one could touch. As days turned into weeks, the change inside him became something he could feel without needing to explain. It was like waking up and realizing that the storm you lived in for years had quietly drifted away, leaving behind a sky that was finally clear. Not perfectly blue, not empty of clouds, just clear enough for light to come through. He found himself moving slower, but not in the sense of laziness. It was a different kind of slowness, deliberate, intentional, rooted, the kind that comes when you are no longer running from yourself. He stopped rushing through conversations. He stopped reacting to every inconvenience. He stopped letting his mind predict disasters that never existed. He noticed a strange thing. The world didn't become more peaceful. People were still loud. Expectations were still heavy. Problems still showed up without warning, but he didn't collapse under them anymore. He didn't feel overwhelmed by everything he couldn't control. Instead, he saw each moment as if it stood alone, no longer chained to the past or distorted by imagined futures. He started walking differently, too, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady, breathing deep and even, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but quietly commanded respect. People sensed it, the calmness, the stability, but they didn't know the battles he had fought inside to earn it. They didn't know how many storms he had survived to learn that true strength is silent. In quiet moments, he would sit with himself and reflect on how far he had come. Not with pride, but with gratitude. Gratitude that he no longer hated his own mind. Gratitude that he could sit alone without drowning in thoughts. Gratitude that he had discovered the difference between thinking and overthinking, between reacting and responding, between living and simply surviving. He began to see how much of life is wasted trying to control things that never belonged to us. People's opinions, the past, the future, the reactions of others, the chaos of the world, all illusions of control. And the more he released them, the lighter he felt, as if he had been carrying a weight he never realized he could simply put down. This was the peace Stoics spoke of, not a life free from difficulty, but a mind free from unnecessary suffering. A mind that stays steady regardless of how loud life becomes. A mind that sees clearly because it is not clouded by fear, ego, or noise. He realized how little he truly needed to feel whole. Not constant entertainment, not endless validation, not the approval of people who barely understood themselves. He needed clarity, purpose, and the courage to show up each day with intention. There were moments, of course, when old habits tried to return. A sudden worry, a moment of anger, a stab of overthinking. But he didn't fall back into the chaos. He watched these moments rise, and he let them pass, the way a seasoned sailor watches waves crash without losing control of the ship. He felt grounded now, anchored, rooted in something deeper than emotions or circumstances. And as he moved through life with this newfound stability, he came to understand a truth that had been waiting for him all along. Peace doesn't arrive with perfect conditions. It arrives when you stop expecting perfect conditions. It arrives when you choose clarity over noise, presence over distraction, and discipline over impulse. And slowly, quietly, powerfully, he became aligned with himself. The storm inside him had not vanished. He had simply learned how to walk through it without losing his way. This was the reflection, the moment where understanding becomes wisdom, where practice becomes identity, where clarity becomes a way of life, not a temporary achievement. And in this silent shift, he became someone he himself could trust. He woke up one morning and felt something he had not felt in years, a quiet certainty. Not excitement, not motivation, not the temporary rush of a good day, but certainty, the kind that settles in your bones and whispers, "You're finally becoming who you were meant to be." He stood by the window, watching the soft light move across the room, and for the first time he understood the real victory. It wasn't the elimination of toxic thoughts. It wasn't the complete silence of the mind. It wasn't becoming someone untouched by chaos. The real victory was awareness, the ability to see his thoughts without becoming them, the strength to feel emotions without losing himself in them, the wisdom to respond instead of react, the discipline to choose the higher path, even when the lower one called his name. He realized that life would never stop testing him. People would still disappoint him. Challenges would still shake his foundation. The world would still be loud, unpredictable, and unfair. But none of that held the same power over him anymore. Because he had learned the truth, you don't have to silence the world to find peace. You only have to silence the parts of yourself that amplify its noise. He breathed deeply, and the air felt lighter. His mind felt sharper. His energy felt aligned, not scattered. He was no longer controlled by old fears, old stories, or old patterns. He had taken responsibility for the one thing the Stoics said was always his to command, his inner world. And as he moved forward, step by intentional step, he carried with him a truth so simple, yet so transformational, that it lived like a quiet echo in his mind. Peace is not something you wait for. Peace is something you practice. He understood now why Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Those words were not philosophy. They were survival, they were clarity, they were freedom. He walked out the door, the day unfolding before him like a test he was no longer afraid to take. Not because he expected ease, but because he had finally discovered the strength to face difficulty without collapsing. Clarity, discipline, presence, these were no longer things he chased, they were things he lived. And as he stepped into the world, calm, aware, unshaken, he carried the final truth with him: control your mind, or it will control you. If this message spoke to your inner battle, stay with this journey. This is Stoic Mode On, where philosophy becomes strength, and strength becomes peace. Subscribe, protect your mind, and live the truth daily. Your freedom begins where your excuses end. Your clarity begins where your fear stops. Your life begins the moment you finally decide to master yourself. And that moment is now.